Hey guys, this is Sabir again. This time we will continue our AuthJs implementation in SvelteKit. In the first part, we added a minimal login and logout feature using AuthJs. Let me show you the final version that we will build today. In this app, we have two public routes, which are home and about us. Then there are two private routes, which are profile and account. If users attempt to access the private route, they will be redirected to the home page. If a user new to the website, they will be provided with a Google login form to complete their login.
Let's add a name for our application.
Add some proper markup for our app so that it doesn't look ugly.
Add the utility class one by one and check the result on the browser.
Since the sign out button only makes sense when the user is logged in, we can add the button inside the if condition where the button will only be visible when the user is logged in. Let's write an else condition and move the sign in button inside it. So the sign in button will only be visible when the user logs out. Now let's improve the markup even further.
If you are expert using Tailwind CSS, you can simply skip this part. If not, I would strongly suggest you to slow down my video and write utility class with me. Make sure to continuously check the result on the browser so that you can understand those utility class more effectively. Check again on the browser and you can see after signing in, we can see the sign out button, and after sign out, we can see the sign in button. Here I made a silly mistake. I misspelled email. Let's create one public and one private route.
Create a route for the user's account.
This will be private route. Create plus page.svelte file. Here I'm adding some basic content for the page. Create another route. This will be our public route. Create plus page.svelte file and add some markup too.
Navigating to this route by writing the path name directly in the browser URL is repetitive and annoying.
We can add a basic navigation bar to change route easily. Go to the website of DaisyUI.
Let's add a simple menu from DaisyUI.
I'm going to select very simple one. Add all the route and their URL.
I'm going to make the menu full width and I want the app name too. So I'm going to add another unordered list and use the menu horizontal
utility class
from DaisyUI inside the unordered list. Since the menu and menu horizontal class use flex, I can easily use justify between utility class to position the app name on the left side and the menu on the right side of our page. Now, if you use the navigation menu, you will notice that we are now able to visit the account route even when we are not logged in. This is because we haven't added any logic to this route. Here I made a mistake. I created the page.server.js file inside the about page, which should be inside the account page. Because about page is public route, so we should not add any logic inside the page server file to restrict its users. Let's create a page server file inside the account route. Paste the default load function code where we are returning nothing. Inside the load function, we can add a locals argument. Let's console log the locals argument.
It's always a good practice to console log any object before using for any task.
You'll notice that the session is null because we are not logged in to this app.
If you are struggling to find out the log in the terminal, You can add custom log message and look for that in the terminal.
If you notice carefully and hover over any navigation menu, and you will see the log in the terminal even when you are not pressing any button. This is happening because if you open the app.html file, you will see a parameter inside the body tag where the preload is true. This means whenever we hover over any navigation menu, SvelteKit will try to fetch all data for that page so that the user experience can be enhanced. For this demonstration, we don't need this feature, so let's comment it out and use a simple body tag. Now you can notice the log on the terminal appear only when you press the navigation menu.
Make sure you have opened plus page.server.js file of account route.
Let's make the load function async. Create a variable called session. We'll use the locals to extract information and store it inside newly created session variable.
Console log this session variable.
You can notice the session is null on the terminal right now because we haven't logged in yet. Let's go to the landing route and sign in with Google. Now, if you go to the account route, you can notice on the terminal that our session information is now available. So we can use this session variable and check if it is available and not null. If this condition met, then we can allow the user to visit protected route. Otherwise, we can show or redirect the user to the home page, or we can simply return a status code indicating that the user is not authorized to access the route. Here, we are using an error function imported from SvelteKit. By using the error function to send a status code of 401 and a message that the user must sign in to access the account information. Let's check on the browser.
Make sure that you are signed out.
And you can notice on the console that the message appears that the user cannot access the route if the user is not logged in.
Now, if you try to log in and then try to visit the account route, you can notice after login you can access the account route. You can notice everything is working as expected, but
this is kind of a stupid method to protect a route. Let me show you why I'm calling this method a stupid method. Let's create another route and call it profile and add a plus page.svelte file with some simple markup.
I'm going to add profile route inside the navigation menu to quickly navigate the routes.
Create a page.server.js file inside the profile route. Simply copy the previous logic that we have written for the account route.
And now try to log out and then try to access the profile route. And you can see that you cannot access the information without logging in.
The problem with this method, whenever we want to protect in the route using this method, we have to write the code again and again. This is why I used to call this method a stupid method. Let me show you how you can improve the same thought process in a non-repeated way using the server hook file. Since we are not going to use the server.js file to protect route, let's comment out all the logic that we have written so far inside the page.server.js file. If you visit my website again and search for AuthJs blog post, you can notice that I have added a non-repeated method of protecting a route. Let's implement that.
In my blog post, I have described a non-repetitive process of implementing login with GitHub. We will use the same method and implement Google login in a non-repetitive way.
First, comment out the previously exported handle function. Don't worry, we will rewrite the same code in a more efficient way using ES6 method of JavaScript. We'll create a variable and call this SvelteKit auth function from the AuthJs package. The result is now stored inside SvelteKit auth variable, which we can use anytime we want. You may notice that the terminal is showing an error because we haven't exported the handle function yet, which is required for hooks.server.js file.
Let's export handle function.
This time we will store only the result from this SvelteKit auth function.
So far, we have written the previous code in a modular method.
Now let's implement the same logic to protect multiple routes from hooks.server.js file. We'll follow the ES6 method again and create a variable called custom handle. Inside this variable, we'll call an arrow function. I want the arrow function to be asynchronous, and this arrow function will take an argument of event. The event contains all the information about what the client requested. Now create another variable where we will store an array of information about all the protected routes of our application.
Add those routes one by one here.
Before writing the if condition, let's console log the event and check what it offers. If you reload the page and look for the event that we have console logged, you cannot find anything. This is because we have created the variable but haven't called it yet. We have exported only one function inside the handle function, but now we have to call multiple functions one by one. For that, we can import sequence from SvelteKit. Let's import a sequence from SvelteKit and use it to call multiple functions one by one. Now if you reload the browser, you can see another problem, a 500 internal error. This happened because we haven't returned anything from the custom handle function.
Let's return the event.
Again, you can see another error occurring. This is because we cannot directly pass event. We can use the resolve function to return the event.
For that, let's take the resolve function as an argument of our custom handle function, then return the event using the resolve function.
Finally, we can see the event console log on our terminal. If you see carefully, you can see the URL that user requested are located inside url.pathname. Also, we have the information about whether the user is logged in or not inside the locals object. So we can use both of this information to protect any route. Just like we have done previously in server.js file, we can create a variable and call it session and extract auth from the event. I would strongly recommend you to console log session and event both and look at all the data they contains. In our case, we can see the session is now showing null because the user is not logged in. So let's log in using the button that we have created. Check the session result again on the terminal. Now you can see the session is not null anymore. And we have information about the user that logged in using their Google account. Finally, we are able to write the logic. Let's create the if-else logic and check if the user requested URL is inside our private routes variable. If that matched, we are going to check if this session is null, or we can check if the user is available inside the session variable or not. If the user or session is not available, then we can throw a redirect request and send the user back to the landing page where they can log in using the button that we have created earlier. Let's check the implemented logic on the browser.
Since we're already logged in, we're able to visit account route. Let's sign out.
And you can notice if we press the profile or account navigation menu, we cannot access that without logging in.
Every time we are trying to access the protected route, we are redirected to the landing route.
We can only access those private routes when we logged in. This method is non-destructive, non-repetitive, and more efficient than the previous method. So let's create another route and check how easy it is now to protect any route using the same method without writing all the logic again and again. For this demonstration, I'm going to call it user info. Let's create a page.svelte file and
Add some basic markup. Navigate to the route by entering the new URL on the browser. The URL is case sensitive, so I have to correct my URL. And it's working. Since it is user information route, let's edit the text.
open the hooks.server.js file and add the user info route inside the protected route array.
Since we have already prepared our hooks.server.js file, that should make the new user info route as the protected route. For easier navigation, let's add the user info route in our navigation menu.
Add the route to the navigation menu inside the layout.svelte file. Let's check on the browser. You can see you cannot access the user info route.
Let's log in and try to access the route again. You can see after sign in, you can access the private route. So this is that easy to add new route as the protected route.
So our logic is completed. Let's improve the user experience even further. If you noticed, the account, the profile, and the user info in the navigation menu only make sense when the user is logged in. That means we can add a simple logic to the layout.svelte file to hide all those routes from users who are not logged in. And if they are logged in, we can render those routes. Open the layout.svelte file and check the data that we have console logged at the beginning of this tutorial.
The session token is null because there is no authenticated user. So let's sign in and you can notice the session token is now containing the user information.
So we can write a simple if-else condition and check if the session variable inside this session token is not equal to null. If the session data is not equal to null, only then we can render the account, profile, user info, navigation menu. Finally, check the implemented logic on the browser and you can see whenever the user logs in, all three menu appears. And whenever the user logged out, all three menu will be hidden. Even if you try to access those protected route by entering the path name on the URL, you can notice the application redirect you immediately to the landing page. So that's all for today. Thank you.